Welcome to the Centre for Geopolitics from Cambridge University in the UK. Thank you for joining our latest webinar. And today our subject is Brexit. It's a subject that's largely been displaced by the upheaval caused by the coronavirus pandemic in the last 2 or 3 months. But the focus is coming back. The UK government's been very clear that it doesn't want an extension and the transition period should end on December the 31st. So how likely is it that a deal can be reached by then? And what are the domestic pressures on both sides that might make them more likely to compromise or more likely not to? And how pivotal a role might Germany play through its presidency of the EU Council that's coming up? And what about the geopolitical impact of the COVID-19 crisis on the Brexit question? Will it drive the EU and the UK further apart or closer together, especially when it comes to dealing with outside major powers like the US and China? I'm Bridget Kendall, former BBC diplomatic correspondent and now Master of Peterhouse, Cambridge, and I'll be your chair this evening. And this is above all a British-German conversation with 2 German and 2 British panelists. So we're joined by Dr. Franziska Brandner, German parliamentary deputy for the Green Party and member of the Bundestag Committee on European Affairs. Welcome, Franziska. Cynthia Müller, German parliamentary deputy for the SPD and member of the Defense Committee of the Bundestag. Welcome to you, Cynthia. Professor Christopher Hill, Emeritus Professor of International Relations and Policy, the University of Cambridge, and author of the recent book, The Future of British Diplomacy, Security, British Foreign Policy, Security and Diplomacy in a World After Brexit, as well as numerous works on the external relations of the EU and its member states. And we're also hoping to be joined shortly by Bob Seeley, Conservative MP for the Isle of Wight and member of the House of Commons Foreign Affairs Committee. He tells us his ferry to the Isle of Wight has been held up slightly, so we hope he'll be with us in just a minute. Before we hear from the panel, do remember, if you're in the audience, we very much want to hear from you too. If you have got a question you'd like to ask, your microphones and cameras are off, but you can send in questions via the Q&A option on the screen. Give your name and affiliation and where you're from, and do say if your question is for a particular panelist. And just to add that we are, as usual, live streaming, and you'll find the recording up later on the Centre for Geopolitics website. So let's start with the short term and the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on both sides' willingness to make a deal about Brexit. The rhetoric's been quite bad-tempered and in public in recent weeks, both sides accusing each other of reneging on agreements. But the question is, what does this really tell us about the political will on both sides? And the big question, of course, is this coronavirus pandemic. Does it make a deal, an agreement before the end of the year more likely or less likely? Can I start with you, Franziska? What do you think?
I would have thought that it would make it more likely at the beginning of the crisis and when it became clear that we're all heavily affected. But as it turns out, it's not making it more likely. I have been really surprised that the UK, for example, is completely refusing to even go into talks on foreign and security affairs, on cybersecurity. I mean, like, these are issues we're so much confronted with, and the UK is not even wanting to talk to the EU about our future relationship in this area. Seriously, I'm really wondering what the reasons behind this are. And I'm saddened to see that the UK is not implementing what has already been decided, for example, on Northern Ireland and Northern Irish protocol. So, you know, I had hoped that we had a good political declaration to work on, which Boris Johnson himself had negotiated word by word, comma by comma, and that now he refuses to even sort of know of. So it's even less likely, and probably gonna hit towards a scenario that Boris Johnson wanted from the beginning, a no deal. We are preparing for that. So preparations are starting to go much faster in that direction. I hope we're not gonna end up there, but I think we just have to be realistic and prepared better.
What about you, Cynthia? What's your view?
first of all, we don't want the UK to leave. We don't want them to leave the EU, and we always have open arms for them to come back. We're strong believing in the European idea, and we feel very bad about losing Britain out of the family as a member of the family. But nevertheless, now we're talking about the Brexit itself, and to me, it's kind of strange to see, because it's more an expert discussion, and we are all very busy with dealing with the corona crisis, and then there is the Brexit. And so far it seems to me that the UK really doesn't want to have a solution for the what Franziska just said and pointed out, for the very important deal that we have to close in the end. And it makes me very thoughtful about the future, and about also, of course, about the future trading conditions that we have to live with, because as Germany and as a Northern German politician, we strongly belong or hang on good trade conditions and on good trade relations between the countries. So we have a very thoughtful and also very sorrowful view on the situation itself at the moment.
Chris, we'll hear from Bob Seeley in a moment, I hope, if he can make it to us from his ferry. But in the
I
meantime,
hope so too.
But in the meantime, Chris, as a Cambridge professor and someone with a long experience of UK foreign policy, EU policy, what do you bring to this? What do you see at the moment?
Well, in terms of predicting these things, I mean, we're all in the same boat, really. It's not possible to predict the exact outcome. But I think if I say two things, firstly about the head of government and then about the kind of domestic structural issues, but keep it brief. But if a lot depends on Boris Johnson's personal attitudes, he seems to me to be the kind of person who's got the attitude of a poker player, but he's playing on a chessboard. He's got a very large number of complicated pieces to move around, but he's trying to play hardball and presumably hoping either that, as in the past, the EU last October, for example, the EU will move a bit and give him what he wants, and he'll be able to wave an agreement at the British people on the future relationship and say, look, I got it. I told you that if we only were tough enough, something would happen. Or he might be equally happy with it all breaking down and the EU holding its nerve, sticking together, and it not happening. And he can say, well, I've shown you how we've stood up to the Europeans who wanted to limit our sovereignty and all the rest of it. So from his rather narrow point of view, you could see it as a win-win. But I think that that's rather superficial, because I think there are so many pressures on him, both from even within his own party, and he's filled the cabinet with Brexiters, but even so, in Parliament, it's interesting to hear what Bob Seeley has to say, but from public opinion as well. Now, it's true that public opinion is still very divided, but the intensity of people's preferences about Brexit has clearly dropped off. All the data shows that people have other concerns, but that the country is still divided more or less 50-50. And the agenda on that the British government has before it, including Brexit and the Northern Ireland Protocol, but now also trying to get a new immigration policy separate from the EU, dealing with poverty, and conducting new trade deals with the United States, with Japan, absorbing DFID into the Foreign Office. I mean, this is a massive agenda. And I think any half-rational Prime Minister is going to have to make some concessions, both domestically and on the European negotiating board. So my prediction is that we will end up with some rather loose future relationship document, which will include a free trade deal of some kind, but that there will be an implementation phase, not of course an extension, we couldn't possibly call it that, but there will be an implementation phase attached to the agreement to sort out the details. Don't forget that the political declaration goes to 31 pages and God knows how many clauses. And the British draft of the trade agreement has 292 pages. So clearly the British civil service has done quite a lot of work, and possibly even the Conservative Party has done quite a lot of work and on the detail. And these things I don't think are just going to be chucked into the waste paper basket.
It looks as though Bob is nearly with us, but we'll give him a chance to connect. Just to follow up with that, Chris, it's interesting what you were saying about the implementation phase, because I was wondering, do you think you can get around this? Here is Bob. Bob, very nice to see you. We're just, let me introduce you to the...
Slight delay on our ferry.
Yes, so we heard, yes. But we're very pleased that you're with us now. Our other panelists, just so you know, Franziska Bratner from the Green Party and on the Bundestag Committee of European Affairs, and Siemtje Müller from the SPD and on the Defence Committee of the Bundestag, and Professor Christopher Hill, Emeritus Professor of Cambridge. And we've kicked off our discussion looking at Brexit and coronavirus with the short term, with wondering what the impact of this crisis of the last 2 to 3 months has been so distracting and has caused so much upheaval, what it might do to the willingness of both sides to conclude their negotiations and make a deal by the deadline of the end of the year. So we've heard from the others, and I wondered what your view is on that, Bob.
I'm just sort of gathering my thoughts as we speak, and I heard the back end of Professor Hill's very sensible words. I mean, I think generally, I think the reason why the government seems to be adamant on continuing to push in the direction that it is because I think it was scarred by Theresa May's negotiation tactics and the fact that she seemed to be battered by being pressured from all sides and in the end unable to achieve a resolution that satisfied anybody, clearly with the help of an opposition Labour Party that had a lot of votes in the House of Commons and simply wished to defeat her and the Conservatives, but she wasn't able to get her deal through. And I think that scarred the Conservatives in that period. I think Boris is thinking that we're going to have none of that. He's a naturally confident person. His critics may say he's a naturally overconfident person, but he's certainly naturally confident. I think he is willing to take a hit on this, but he doesn't expect he's going to be having to do so. And I think that there is an assumption on the British side that there is going to be realization from the European Union that a deal that suits both parties is better than a deal that damages both parties. So I think that's where we are with Brexit. Coronavirus has, maybe bizarrely, maybe not, I think coronavirus has actually reinforced that, because if there is an economic hit, good luck to anyone who wants to measure it.
So let's come back to you, Franziska, on this. Bob Seeley was saying he thought that Boris Johnson is a poker player on a chessboard. And Bob Seeley, you've sort of slightly reinforced what Chris said by saying, you know, he does want to play hardball. He wants to be tough and thinks then that the EU will see that unless they give something, they might get nothing. So
yes, I think that's the case. And I think that the reality is, look, if we walk away with nothing, which clearly I think would be a shame, the upside is the greater freedom that we have not to take the EU's interests into account when we do deals or when we engage with the idea and build out this idea of global Britain. So there is an element that actually says, it's not one I support, but WTO actually suits us because we take a hit and then in the longer run, we're better off. Clearly, European Union remains significant largest trading partner. It would be great if we had a deal with them, but it's not going to come at the price of our willingness or our ability to negotiate other deals.
Franziska, what do you think about that?
No, I think, Bob, it's a pleasure to be introduced to you and meet you online. So I think what you said is right, Bob, in the sense that the corona crisis allows you to hide one crisis into the other. So who will be able to say, this is because of corona, this is because of Brexit? Hard to tell. It will be big. You already have a huge economic crisis in your country. It might get worse, better, hard to tell what exactly will be the factors for that. And that's the feeling we got, that Boris Johnson might use that crisis to hide the Brexit crisis. And secondly, you said, if both sides would see that, find a plan that suits both sides, they would agree, of course. I'm like, that's what everybody's looking for. The EU is not saying we don't take any plan that suits both sides and then we trash it. And you said in the end, that's exactly the position of the UK, which is not acceptable to the EU. You said, we want to have our freedom to do the deals with the US that we want to do and other countries and still have 100% access to the internal market. And that's just not going to fly. And, we have been repeating this. This is not going to be possible. You can't have your chlorine chicken and have access to the EU market. You can't have access to the EU market and don't accept the definition of mozzarella and then import, American mozzarella that has different ingredients. It's just not going to work. So I think, if this, having both sides, and at the 100% both sides, if you will stick to this position, there will be no deal. And the question is at what point there will be a realization that there's, that you have to pick. I don't know. If it won't be, then we have a hard deal at the end of this year. I would really pity it. I think it would be a pity. I'm like, if you look at the figures, EU exports to the UK, 8% of our all over exports, UK to the EU, 42 of the UK exports. So, okay, if you play hardball, let's play hardball. I think you're going to be hit harder. I think it's a terrible way to go. We can have so much in common that we should benefit on, especially in this crisis. If your partner is going to be Trump, good luck. Seriously, I think it's very sad the way it's going. And I hope there are going to be more voices in the UK to call for reason.
Fine. I mean, it's the government that's negotiating. I'm giving an opinion on the government's position. As a moderate Brexiteer, I'm actually half German. I have to say, I'm a little tired of hearing how Brits are going to suffer, how it's going to be awful. I mean, one of the most fascinating things for me in the last 3 years is how all the doom and gloom from the Remainers, none of it's come to pass. We were told there would be an immediate
still inside. Because you're de facto still inside. We're still in the phase of 1 year where
no, that's not true. No, that's not true. You see, the problem is we were told there was to be an immediate and severe recession, even after the vote, before we left, after the vote, and it simply didn't happen. And in fact, okay, prior to COVID, the UK economy was coping pretty well, and I know that I keep being told that there's going to be an economic crisis in the UK. Actually, there's been a running crisis in the EU caused by the euro for the last decade, which is destroying the economies and the life chances of the Mediterranean countries and the whole Mediterranean basin. The only people that have been doing well in the EU economically in the last decade is Germany. It's done incredibly well. Holland and, those sort of northern Germanic countries. The rest of them, the French have been suffering a bit. The Mediterranean countries have been suffering appallingly. And I get the fact that there's really, I'm not into finger pointing and saying who's worse off, because actually prosperous Europe is good for us. Prosperous UK is good for Europe. And I don't like to see the European Union as a declining world power, which is sadly what it is. But I mean, look, there are problems in both our countries, and I'm just concerned to support the best deal I can. I will trust the government to do that, but rather than just say, gosh, the UK is going to do incredibly badly because the European Union is just this model of shining success, I don't really buy it.
That's what I said. I'm like, it's your choice. Seriously, I do pity it. I was
pity it away. I mean, the trade imbalance we have with the European Union is much greater. So if people are going to get hurt, we buy from the European. We're the European Union's largest market. We're Germany's largest trading partner. We're a bigger trading partner than China. Do I want to see that damaged by Brexit? No, of course I don't. But actually, just saying, oh, you're going to do really badly. Actually, Germany sells more to Britain than any other country in the world, including China. And we are the biggest trading partner now for the European Union. If you want to shoot us in the foot, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot as well. So there's probably a lesson there to be learned, isn't there?
All I said is that it's not going to be helpful for either side. If you decide to go down this road, I do pity it, but
Well, when you say we go down this road, do you mean both sides? Because you don't sound that supportive of understanding the UK position. I'm trying to build some bridges here. And you're basically saying, we're going down this obscurantist path. We chose to leave the European Union because we were concerned about the lack of sovereignty, lack of democracy, lots of other things about it. None of those things have been sort of listened to. None of those concerns, judging by listening to the debate in the European Union, it's more Europe, whatever this sort of nebulous, slightly left of centre phrase always means, of greater solidarity. I mean, I'd love to actually, after 40, 50 years, get a definition of what that is.
I can even see that as a politician in the UK, I would go for getting both worlds, getting the world outside the EU and keeping the EU. I can understand your intention, but of course we're not going to agree to this because it would be silly for us. But I can understand that this is your goal. I'm like, if I could get the best of both worlds, wonderful, let's do it. Why not? The question is just if we as Europeans are going to accept it or not.
But you're speaking on behalf of everybody in Europe, are you?
I'm speaking of the big majorities that are in favor of keeping the European internal market in function and not destroying hundreds of thousands of jobs by making the UK a cheap assembly space for then importing into the EU. Yes, I think this is not everybody in the EU. I know there are many who want, in each country you have 10, 15% who would like to go national again. And I think we have so much that we should cooperate on when you look in this world these days. You said the EU is a fading power. When you look at the big picture, yes, we are a smaller country in terms of taking us together, but the UK on itself is even smaller. So let's even, I said in the beginning, you weren't there. I find it really sad that the UK is not even talking to the EU about the future relationship on foreign affairs and security or cybersecurity. You don't even go into the talks. You say, no, we're not going to talk about a future relationship with you on foreign security policy. I find it crazy. Like, even if you talk about all the internal market stuff, that you're not ready, your government, to talk to the EU about the future relationship on security, cybersecurity, all of these issues.
Let's come on to that in a minute, the broader questions of foreign policy and so on. Bob, I just wanted to pick up with you something that Chris mentioned just as you were joining, which is about the deadline and the fact that all this is supposed to be over by the 31st of December. And if you are playing poker, you kind of need to know, you've got to keep your nerve right till the very last minute, and that's when the other person will blink, right? But there is a question about how hard is this deadline? Because there are some people who've hinted that if you run out of time, perhaps you don't need to say we're giving into an extension. We're not extending the transition period. Instead, you could call it a prequel to implementation, for example. So then the deadline doesn't become so hard, and then the tactic of waiting for the other side to blink might become a bit more difficult.
I mean, I'm not quite sure about this because, look, as a backbencher member of Parliament, I sort of, I'm not in the little sort of entourage world of Downing Street, etc., etc. So I can just give you a feel for where I think it going. And I think there are a series of strands that are running roughly at the same time. And I'm personally not quite sure which one of those is going to end up. If the determination to get, I mean, we could go down the absolutist route. We could go down a slightly fudged route, which is maybe as likely, if not more likely, an outcome that we end up with a series of sector deals primarily. I think it's going to go in lots of different ways. The mood music that I've heard in the last month is that there's a happy amount of realism on both sides to get something that the European Union can live with and get something that the UK can live with that sort of respects everyone's red lines. And with a lot of this stuff, actually, it's a matter of interpretation. And that we all know that the European Union, like the UK, you have these demands, and then after endless sort of smokeless room deals at the last minute, various fudges are normally arrived on. That's pretty much the history of European Union summits, frankly, in the last 30 years or so. So it might be that actually come the sort of 12th hour, we have a series of significant sector deals that actually protect lots of sectors, like car manufacture, whatever, that the European Union gives some ground, the UK gives some ground in certain areas, and then you continue to have this transition phase. So it may not be the hard Brexit or the hard timetable, may actually have some softer edges to it. And that's what I'm trying to find out from our own side here as well. And I hear that Mr. Barnier is there's clearly the Verhofstadt school of EU diplomacy, which is that the British have committed this cardinal sin of leaving the great sort of EU empire, and they must be punished. And there are more realistic people who realise that we're Germany's largest trading partner, that we're the European Union's largest trading partner, that we need to have a defence agreement, that NATO is built effectively around European Union states. So, that Britain has always had one foot in and one foot out of Europe and the European Union. We've always looked at the wider world, but at the same time, clearly have been heavily involved in European affairs because we're a European state. So there's all these factors playing into what's happening at the moment.
Cynthia, on that score, Germany is just about to take over the presidency of the EU Council. Do you think there's a special role for Germany here? I mean, Bob talked about German pragmatism and interest in trying to see if there can be realism on both sides.
Can I just
the other side of that, of course, is sorry, Francesca, you wanted to say something?
Repeating wrong numbers. The exporting countries for Germany, the UK is the 4th largest after the Netherlands. Okay, so the Netherlands is more important to Germany than the UK. I just want to have no wrong facts in this conversation, please.
Okay, all right. Cynthia, back to you on the German presidency. Do you think there's the bandwidth from the German government to focus enough on Brexit? I think Germany has said its priority, understandably, in the next 6 months is coronavirus.
Sure. I want to make maybe firstly a comment on what I just heard from the British side. To me, it's maybe call me a very pragmatic politician, but what I heard so far is a lot of analysis and a lot of punishing the other part, a lot of lefty phrase, so-called Bob's the European idea, and I want to ask the question: if we are stuck right now where we are, what would be your proposal apart from what gave Britain so far? And it's now that you had a lot of talking time, maybe I want to answer also Bridget's question. Of course, it is Germany's role as a center, as a heart, be positioned in the heart of Europe to take care of the coronavirus crisis, but also take part of all what is going on in Europe. And I believe as being very well trained in mediating and doing negotiation, as being a platform and a mediator, it is Germany's natural role to also play a special role in the Brexit negotiations. There's sometimes the idea that there could be sort of bilateralization of negotiations. This is something that Germany is not taking into account. This is something that we rule out, and there will be European UK negotiations, but Germany won't play a special role in having a deal apart, but playing a central role in the presidency.
Bob, do you think that having German in the presidency might make a difference?
I think it'd probably be a positive thing. Can I just reinforce? I support the government because I'm a Conservative member of Parliament, but I'm not a member of the government. So, and I know that people.
We know how parliamentary democracy works.
Yeah, I know that, but I'm just saying that. I mean, I sometimes when I'm in talks with people about Brexit, I'm somebody who voted for Brexit, so I'm sort of, partly responsible. So I do get. It's still an emotional issue for both sides, and I'm trying in a reasonably unemotional way to give opinion. So,
well, if this is unemotional, I don't want to meet you when you're emotionally. But
I'm really being quite straightforward, and if it sort of offends you, then whatever. I'm trying my best to give what I think is a balanced opinion of what the British government's trying to do. If it's not good enough for you, sorry to say that. Bridget, so sorry, what's your question?
I was asking about the German presidency in the next 6 months.
Yeah. I think they're likely to be sensible because I think Germany is realistic. I think Germany is disappointed and doesn't really yet emotionally or practically understand why the Brits behaved as they did. In the same way that American liberals thought that Brexit was our version of voting for Donald Trump. And I don't buy that. Someone who was appalled by Donald Trump but not appalled by Brexit, I don't buy that sort of. I don't buy that relationship at all. And I think this has got much more to do, Brexit had much more to do with Britain's historic view of itself, and also its relationship with Europe and the relationship with the world, how it sees itself as a country which has always been semi-aligned to Europe, but never just a fully European state. Well, certainly not really since in the last 250, 300 years. Sorry, I went down that little rabbit hole and I forgot your question, Bridget. What
the question was about the German presidency.
Yes, I think it's, yeah, like I think they're pretty sensible. I think they're still an emotional response to Britain leaving the European Union. I don't think it makes Germany's position any easier, because I think you have lots of free spending French and Latin and Mediterranean economies. I think Germany has fewer allies. I think it makes it more difficult for Germany to, I think the Brits were the most, in some of the things, I think the Germans could sort of play the good cop, bad cop off, because the Brits were in the European Union and the Brits were supporting a position that Germany maybe had a lot of sympathy with when Britain was in the European Union. I think Germany is going to have to be more outspoken on things it cares about now. But at the same time, I think Germany, I buy the idea that Germany could be a very valuable conciliatory power in finding a workable solution for both sides, absolutely. And maybe, I mean, the problem is, one ends up dealing with national cliches here. The idea that France is far more emotionally attracted to the concept of Europe and solidarity and the idea, a notion of a Europe that it buys into. But at the same time, the French, can be very pragmatic as well. So we'll see.
Franziska, you just wanted to come in.
Yeah, I just think it's funny that you described that the Germans, they are sort of emotionally still sad, but then they will become rational. I'm not part of the governing majority, but I can confirm you that this government has been very rational in defending the German interests in the EU position. And I would not bet on hoping that Germany will become rational or pragmatic. It has been. And I was, by the way, the UK is the 5th largest for Germany. It's important, but to have the facts right. And I think what the German presidency will have to do, of course, is to see that we have the Europeans who are still inside the EU around a common position. And it will, I think, have to accelerate the preparations for a no-deal scenario. I really think that we have to push this ahead. The Commission is going to come up with proposals for that in July. And I think this will be key for the German presidency to accelerate the implementation of that.
Chris, you've been listening to everybody. I wondered what your thoughts are. What would you like to add into this conversation? You need to unmute.
Beg your pardon. Yes, thank you. I would like to make a small contribution. I mean, we just can't replay the old arguments, or we shouldn't. And we're certainly not in this session going to be able to knock out a possible sort of benchmark agreement between the two sides. But I think we ought to look at some of the deeper issues. And one of them, I think Bob Seeley alluded to it, is sense of self and identity and symbolic politics. So why, for example, is fisheries such a apparent sticking point at the moment when it's, less than 1% of British GDP or something? Now, on the British side, it has enormous symbolic value, possibly completely anachronistic, simplified given the complexities of our export of fish to the European market and all the rest of it. But it's a fact. That's a political fact that we have to deal with. Now, on the other side, obviously, the symbolic politics are rather different. They are the achievements of the European Union in the post-war period, the way in which countries that suffered occupation and war in a way that we British didn't, whatever issues we like to make of all that, have managed to achieve something which for them is extremely important. And yet, both of us actually are arguing against each other over the same thing. We call it sovereignty. The European Union negotiators call it the autonomy of their decision-making processes. And clearly, both sides from that point of view are right. The referendum was about, in some ways, Britain's willingness to right to leave the European Union, the ultimate gesture of sovereignty. And from the European Union, you can't have outsiders making rules for you. And so therefore the role of the ECJ becomes absolutely central. Now, if we can make compromises over material interests and particular details of the trade policy, we're going to have to, both of us, accept that international relations consists of agreements, and pacta sunt servanda. Agreements are to be kept once they are made, and they inevitably involve not giving up your ultimate right to withdraw from them, but your willingness to commit to something over a period of time. And you know, whatever the outcome of this particular argument, that is still going to be an issue for climate change. It's going to be an issue for civil aviation. It's going to be an issue for NATO Article 5. You know, it's always there. It's what multilateralism is all about. And if the UK really thinks that it can do without multilateralism, I think it is seriously misguided.
Bob. Yeah.
I'd love to come in lastly on the multilateralism point, just on a couple of points. Yeah, sorry, I was looking at my facts, and I did get my facts wrong on Germany-UK trade. It's worth 88 billion, and it's just below Netherlands. So I apologise for getting that wrong. It's important that we get the correct facts. So when I'm wrong, I'm very happy to say that. When it comes to fisheries, Professor, you make a fantastic point. The fact is the gaming industry, as in online gaming, computer gaming industry, is worth so much more than fisheries, as to mention just one of many industries. So you're right, symbols are really important, but they do sometimes get in the way of progress. Sometimes they're very important for upholding principle. But the fisheries thing, you're right, it pales into insignificance compared to many other newer industries, which are probably rather more important to people. But at the same time, fisheries is a motive, and not just for Britain, and regaining, because it was associated with the dowry to give to the European Union back in, you know, however one wants to phrase it. It was the dowry, to put it crudely, that went with our accession into the European Union, as agreed, if I understand, by Edward Heath back in the early 1970s. And I remember the confirmatory referendum when I was a very, very young kid, and thinking that the yes campaign was much more attractive than the miserable no campaign at the time. Clearly, times change. When it comes to the multilateralism, there is an assumption here that there are people who portray the Brexit vote as a little England of rebellion. For me, it's really not. It's about a much more expansive, really quite liberal and very global Britain of the United Kingdom, and one which is being held back by declining European Union power, especially with the huge errors about the introduction of the euro, which has done so much damage to so many economies within it. I know we weren't part of it, but that was part of a federalizing agenda, which has been an unmistakable part of the European Union for decades. So, but when it comes to multilateralism, absolutely right. We need to re-engage. We have, I think, 88 international treaties, and in Euratom and the European Union, we've left 2. Clearly, the European Union, a very critical element of that. But I hope we relearn to be a global nation. I hope we help re-energize the European. I hope we help re-energize the United Nations, because it's badly in need of it. I hope there's much more that we can do to take multilateral international institutions like the WTO, WHO seriously. And yeah, absolutely. Look, I mean, I think we have to work with the European Union wherever possible. But actually, if the European Union thinks about this, having a second aligned voice on these great international bodies, when the European Union represents one vote, I think is in the European Union's, potentially in the European Union's interest, and it's certainly potentially in our interest, to align as closely as possible and build a new alliance of democracies.
Franziska, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, first of all, it's not correct that the EU has one vote inside the United Nations. It's still one country, one vote.
No, I didn't mean the UN. I meant others, like there are some trade bodies where the European Union has a single vote. So I'm not saying the European Union.
You have the Commission negotiating on behalf of the 27 at the WTO. You still have them as single members. So there's nowhere where the EU's member states vote has been replaced by one. So please, let's be true to the facts. It's so sad to go always back to the facts. And I agree with you that it would be good to have cooperation in these international fora. And that's why I cannot understand why the UK government is not even ready to go into talks on how we will do this. They have for the last 4 months not been accepting to go into conversations on this. And seriously, let's put aside all the trade, internal market, whatever issues. This question of how do we support multilateralism, we certainly have a shared interest. And let's have a conversation about how to do it. It's going to be soon, in 6 months. And the UK government is not even starting a conversation. And Christopher Hill just mentioned, which I think is very important, is to keep to the treaties and the decisions that you have agreed to. And I have been, it's hard to trust the UK government for the future relationship if they're not implementing what we just agreed in October. And it makes it so much more difficult to be trusting and to have less constraints and less rules and more open of a relationship to be able to evolve in a good spirit. But when we look at the implementation of the Northern Ireland Protocol, when we look at the implementation of the political declaration, it's nothing really going forward. And I think that question of trust is a key one. It's fading with many in Germany who were arguing, let's go in a good spirit. UK is a partner that obeys international law, and who have been always arguing this way. And they're turning now because they're unfortunately seeing that the UK is not keeping to what the same Prime Minister has negotiated in October.
Okay, I just want to move on.
Well, I'm sorry we're such a huge disappointment to you. What can I say?
Let's move on to this broader arena. But before we do, we've had a question, which is from Michael O'Callaghan, who's a sixth form student at King's School in Ely near Cambridge here. And he asks, I'm going to put this to you, Chris Hill. Would you say that the pandemic has shifted the balance of power between the UK and the EU?
That's for me, is it, Bridget?
Yes.
Yes. No, not particularly. I think it's shifted the balance of interest. I think the EU was already getting fed up with Brexit, as many people in Britain were, of course, because the whole process went on so long. But the EU has got many other concerns apart from Brexit. It has to get this done, and the UK is a very important third country. So, interests will certainly have to be taken into account, and no doubt compromises made. But it is not going to put all its eggs in the Brexit basket and therefore be held hostage to the Brexit. So I have no doubt that if the UK government does continue to play hardball and wait for the other side to blink, that the EU is not going to blink, actually. I mean, inevitably, the UK hopes that bilateral relationships, it'll be able to talk to the Germans, talk to the French and so on, the Dutch, and pick them off. That hasn't worked so far. And I don't think it's likely to over the next 9 months. The EU hasn't gone this far down the road to suddenly crumble on that side. But I think that Mr. Seeley knows very well, better than I, that politics can be knocked sideways by events and the unforeseen. After all, the pandemic is the greatest unforeseen any of us have had in our lifetime. So we simply can't take into account, we can't assume for the next 6 months that there's going to be a nice calm sea and a prosperous voyage during which we negotiate all these things. There are going to be lots of things in British domestic politics, and I'm afraid the recession is likely to be the most important of them, and possibly also social unrest. I don't want to exaggerate the current riots we've seen and so on, say that Britain is now falling apart, and other countries will be subject to this as well. But we have to accept that the pandemic has killed a very large number of people. It's kept people locked up for 3 or 4 months, and it has stirred the pot of various discontents. We've seen this in the United States, in Britain, many other countries, and we cannot predict the outcomes of all these. So these negotiations are taking place in will take place in a febrile and uncertain environment.
Bob, would you agree with that?
Yes, because I think the professor's absolutely right. I mean, I think the problem for Boris is that he, in a perfect world, he's a prime minister in happy times, and one where he's got more cash to throw at problems, be it infrastructure, be it the levelling up agenda in the UK, to make sure that we reach into those left behind areas of the UK, which includes the Isle of Wight, I would argue, because we have a in many ways a northern set of, you know, socio-economic problems, employment, etc. We just happen to be right in the south of England. And I think coronavirus, A, which nearly killed him, but B, has clearly thrown this government. And you have a prime minister who wants to live in happy times, where, you know, just and having the freedom to act with a decent amount of money behind him, then suddenly he's faced with a series of very, very significant problems, as Professor Hill highlighted. And you've got a population, half of which is frightened by corona, and the other half is hugely frustrated by it, because although we have saved lives, you know, the UK has not been perfect, and I think there's an awful lot to learn by the way that we've handled this, to put it mildly. You've had the life chances of millions of younger people under 50s put on hold to try to ensure that we save life for over 50s and over 60s and over 70s in specifics. So there is a sort of weird and not very healthy dynamic working its way out. I think for a lot of us, the sooner we can get back to a functioning normality that we can all live with, the better, and that we can get back to taking not too much of a prolonged hit on the economy as well.
Sincha, I wanted to bring you in there on what Bob said, because he's talking about the domestic pressures from coronavirus. Of course, Germany's had a rather different pandemic so far from Britain, but some of these pressures hold true. Does any of this resonate with you, with the concerns that German politicians need to have?
Of course, we have to observe the same effect that public seems to be divided by those who are very afraid and those who are very frustrated. I can observe this in my constituency as well. Even though we are very northern bound people who are usually very quiet, very pragmatic and very down to earth, but also here we have a lot of people very afraid, sometimes even afraid by the decisions to have it less locked down than before. So we have the same mixture here. But of course, we have a bit different situation because the German government took very strong measures to fight coronavirus. That is very different to Britain. So we have less losses than in Britain. And so people sometimes are a bit uncertain to believe the risk that the coronavirus spreads around the world because we have so little losses and so little people affected by the coronavirus. Even though I'm strongly in favor of what we did as the government, and I always fight for the measures that we took, even though it's it will hit us hard economically and but in the sense of budget of Germany. We will have a lot of debt raised, but I was strongly in favor of it, because we could save a lot of people and a lot of lives. Bob, you mentioned that the coronavirus kills. You said has killed him, meaning that it was
well, it nearly killed the Prime Minister here. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
I didn't understand if it was if you meant it in
a political way.
In a political way, because I believe
I meant physically. I mean, it nearly killed him.
Yeah, physically,
physically,
I followed it, but in a sense, politically, it was not really the coronavirus. It was more how you dealt with the coronavirus, because there was the public. I think what you just pointed out, that there's the public divided, being frustrated, being afraid, or this is true. But then it's the role of politicians not to deal with it in a populist way, but to calm people down and to make people understand different interests in the public.
Yeah,
so
okay, on
you
that
also
point,
mentioned you also mentioned that there was a weird dynamic, and I just want to underline that it's you may call me very pragmatic or maybe ultra pragmatic, but I believe that this is now the time that politicians have the role to make people understand what is going on, and not to with populist opinions or whatsoever.
I really don't understand
just
the
make
word.
people more hysteric, because in the end we all want to solve problems, and this is what brings me to ask you again the question: if we are stuck in the one-way road where we are at the moment with Brexit, how to deal with it, and what is your opinion, and how we can get out of being stuck if apart from what is the British proposal so far, because at the moment I see that you have really a bigger problem than we have, and you want to solve problems as good politicians always want. So what is the proposal, how to solve or which road to go down, if not being just walking down the populist road and creating more history?
I don't understand what populism's got to do with this. Sorry, so I'm at a bit of a loss here. Actually, the government, I think, has had an incredibly reasonable approach and tried to be as open and straightforward with people. I don't know where the populism comes in. And this populism seems to be shorthand for sort of people on the right who people on the left don't like. I mean, for me, the most populist prime minister in modern history was Tony Blair, but I don't remember people complaining at him about being a populist. And fake news really started with the revolutionary left back in the mid-19th century. So I'm slightly dubious about these terms, and I don't know what populism has got to do, I'm afraid, with the government's response here, because I think it's been incredibly sensible. So I'm just at a loss, sorry.
Can I just change track a bit here, because we've got 10 more minutes.
Because she had a very precise question to you.
Okay. So yeah, you did ask this twice, Cynthia. But what would you do to get unstuck?
Well, with regards to what?
Brexit.
Are we talking about coronavirus? Or are we talking
we're talking about Brexit. Getting unstuck from where we are in Brexit. If we're at a stalemate, how do you undo it?
Look, I mean, simply, but I'm not part of the negotiation, so I'm not going to be able to give you an incredible as an answer which is as informed as I would like. But clearly, we need to find a deal with the European Union because they're very close allies. We have a defence agreement through NATO with many of them, and we're going to be very close. Look, I mean, if we have a bad relationship with the European Union, it's bad for the European Union, and it's bad for Britain. So clearly, we need to find and overcome those difficulties. I think the European Union needs to respect the emotional reasons behind Brexit, understand them, come to terms with them, and accept what Britain wants to do. And we need to understand, look, we get the whole fact that single market and the rules around the single market are very critical. And I understand the European Union's position that you can't necessarily pick and choose. I get that. I mean, and it's very foolish for people to say we want to pick and choose, but we don't want to be part of the club. I understand that, but I think for the sake of both our country, of both our entities, the European Union and the states that are still in the European Union and Britain, we can try to bend that rules and the fringes, whilst at the same time respecting each other's red lines. So we give the European Union what it wants, and we understand and respect the single European market, which we get. Whilst at the same time, the European Union understands that it's in its interest to keep trade flowing with one of its, if not its largest overseas markets. Now, if we can't make an agreement, then I think both sides are massively at fault. So we have to come to terms with the single European market, and the European Union has to understand where Britain is coming from as well. So it's actually a process of negotiation to conclude something which works in both our interests, because clearly our trade with the European Union is absolutely critical, but the European Union is going to be a lot poorer without our trade, to say nothing of diplomatic relations, climate change, and all the other things that we need to get right, relationship with Russia, relationship with China, etc., etc. So we have to continue to work to strike a deal. I'm not suggesting for 1 second otherwise. I'm not quite sure where populism, again, comes into that.
Can I move on to a slightly different subject, because we touched on it, but we haven't really explored it, which is international affairs and the broader geopolitical context of Covid and Brexit. One of the things that's happened in the last few months is there's been a reevaluation in some quarters of attitudes to other countries. There is the way President Trump has behaved in the United States, but there's also relations with China. And so in that context, do we think that the coronavirus crisis is going to drive the EU and the UK further apart? Okay, we've been talking about the next 6 months or maybe the next 12 months, but if we get beyond that to whatever we've decided, wherever we get to, will this crisis we're in now drive the EU and the UK further apart or closer together, especially when you think about dealing with outside powers like China? This is something I know that you talk about a lot, Bob. I wonder what your view is.
To be honest, I really quite like to listen to Professor Hill and our continental European folks on the panel, because I don't know what the European Union's position is. and I suspect it's probably going to be driven in large part by Germany. I may be wrong. Please feel free, happy to correct me. I think Britain is being forced to make a choice of sorts, and I think in part it's being very heavily influenced by, it's being somewhat influenced by American politics, and very much influenced by the actions that the United States is taking against Huawei. I have to say, it's a shame for us that we're being forced to do something that we should reasonably be doing anyway, because I think as China, as a one-party communist state, is becoming sadly like the one-party communist state that we imagine of old in terms of its behavior, I think we have to understand that the world is changing. And I think one of the problems that we've had in the UK is that we had a lack of strategic thinking. I think we've been lazy. For our trade negotiations, we've worked with the European Union, through the European Union. With our military, we've effectively worked through the United States or NATO. And I think we haven't done, for a country that's got a lot of strategic think tanks, we've done very little strategic thinking of our own. And I think we have to relearn the art of strategic thinking as a sort of significant, not a superpower, but a great power, not a superpower in trade like the European Union, but we have to rethink and relearn the art of strategy and be much better at seeing problems. We were very slow to react to Russia. We have been reasonably slow to act to China, or to give this government its credit. It's doing better than the last few governments. And clearly we planned for the wrong pandemic. So we need to be much better at strategic thinking. And one of those elements is China. I do worry that there's going to be a split between Europe, which will take one position on China, and the United States and the Five Eyes, the old English-speaking nations, which are going to take another. But it would be better if we could all act together. But within the European Union, if I understand, there are countries like the Czech Republic that have a more sort of, I don't want to use the word hawkish, but have a more a position that's probably closer to where the UK may end up.
Chris, can I bring you in here on this one? What, with these elements, especially China, do you think in the long run bring the UK and EU closer together, feeling they need to pull?
Well, I've studied for quite a lot of my career the attempts of the EU to create a common foreign policy, and I'm rather sympathetic to it. I think it needs it as the political arm of its economic activity. And it is also necessary that we have another voice within the West, because otherwise I think we have no option but to fall in when dealing with other great powers behind the United States. And the whole thing started during the Vietnam War, when the Europeans started to feel very uncomfortable with following American policy. So in general, I think the development of European diplomacy has been a good thing and rather moderate. But there is no doubt that it has suffered when trying to create a common voice towards any of the big powers, and I include the United States, Russia and China among those. It has been very difficult for the EU to hold together, and the big powers have quite easily divided and ruled them. Now, it doesn't follow, I'm afraid, as Mr. Seeley thinks, that we can therefore sort of leave behind the apparent failure of the EU to get its act together and create a league of democracies. I mean, the Commonwealth is clearly not a very effective strategic operation. Our diverging interests with the United States have become all too clear and will be still there even without President Trump. So I think that actually, even though outside the European Union, we are doomed to cooperate with our geopolitical neighbours and countries with whom, very broadly speaking, we have some important common values. Not to say that we don't with the United States or with New Zealand, Australia and all the rest of it, but the fact is that we do have a powerful interest in the stability and peace of the European continent. And we've been a leading player in the enlargement of the EU, in which we made a few mistakes, but nonetheless, if we are not going to be able to influence the shape of the European Union and its role in the European continent very easily from the outside, unless we are willing to have an association agreement on politics. And we are certainly not going to be able to persuade the Chinese what they need to do over Hong Kong or whatever without the support of our both the United States and our European allies. So I think we are being pushed willy-nilly back into some kind of collective diplomacy.
Sorry, can I just add very briefly? When I said League of Democracies, it's not instead of the European Union. I'm including the European Union in whatever form those members decide to express themselves, be it through a unified foreign policy albeit through a sort of the construct that they have at the moment. But we need to work with them and work with Kazakh nations, the United States, etc., etc. And you're right. The problem is when you use the example of Hong Kong, I'm not sure the Chinese are really good to listen to anybody. And so, regardless of whether the UK was in the European Union or not, I'm unconvinced at how that would have made much difference, for example, to that case.
So, Cynthia, you're on the Defence Committee of the Bundestag, so you've got a particular interest in this area. What's your thoughts on this? Well, longer term, will particularly the crisis we're facing at the moment and all the ramifications of it, including China policy, mean the EU and the UK will come closer together, or will they be further apart?
I hope so. I would agree on what Bob Seeley just mentioned, that we had all together a lack of strategic thinking, not only in the UK, but also in the whole European community, so to say, because we were living more or less on an island of peace and economic growth, and everybody was happy, more or less. And now we have to face that Russia and also China have a very good view on strategic thinking and are interpreting both strategic thinking and geopolitics in a very old-fashioned, realistic way, using different instruments, but having a very strong view on it. And we as Europe as whole, and I would count UK under this umbrella a bit, at least have a lack of. We have to answer some questions: how to have own sovereignty, how to fight for own interests, how to invest in own defense instruments if we have to face the Trump administration and they're stepping back at least a bit from saving Europe as a whole all the time. And so coming back to growing up, maybe as Europe, we have to face this interest, and we have to find an answer. I don't have it at the moment, but at least we have another view on another perspective as we had before, facing the developments in China and facing also developments in Russia. As member of the Defense Committee, I have insights in the weapon arsenal of Russia, and this makes me more frightened than before. And I believe that we have to create at least a defense environment that we can save our people from, or that we have, that we can ensure defending our people. This is, I always hope that there will be no war anymore, and I think that all what we have to invest in defending ourselves has to prevent from having another war and just having longer peace and stability in Europe. We had a strong debate on China in terms of 5G, because we have we are discussing to create something like an Airbus for 5G in Europe, if we have to, or if we can or not, because there's the influence of China is inevitable. So how to have own hardware and how to create 5G, not depending on China so much as we have to foresee at the moment.
Franziska.
No, I think it's quite interesting, because the one positive thing I have been continuously saying about the UK the last couple of weeks was the shift on Huawei, and that the British Parliament decided to change the position, because the German Chancellor Merkel has continuously been repeating that she will follow the British way, but now that the British way has changed, she's not following suit. But I think, you know, it's the right decision to keep our European actors and players in. And I think, you know, Ericsson, Nokia are big. They're not as innovative as they should be. We have great European software companies doing it, 4G, 5G, developing the next generation. And I hope that during this COVID recovery, we will be able to bring the big ones, Ericsson, Nokia, together with the smaller ones and create a more innovative, big European player. But yeah, it's true on that question. Germany is the key, and so far, Chancellor Merkel has, you know, kept her decision, and I know that seemed to is not on that line, and I applaud the Social Democratic Party in Germany, also the parliament, for having, you know, made that clear. To be frank, also many in the Conservative Party share that opinion and have voiced that opinion, like Norbert Röttgen and others. But yes, if Germany doesn't, as a country, as in the end, as a decision maker in the Bundestag, we do not change positions, that will make us more vulnerable in the future. But in terms of, you know, I think it would be difficult if the EU gets completely on one or the other side of the American-Chinese increasing tensions. And I hope that we will not have to scramble at one point and have to choose a side. Is that realistic? I hope we will be in that position. We should do everything for it. And I hope it will be the same for you, and that we at one point can get together. And to be frank, in that sense, really, if you can pass a message to your government to start negotiations on the foreign affairs future relationship, on security, I really think it's high time. I'm like, what do you have, you know, what do we have to lose? In the end, if we disagree, we do disagree, but not to talk about it. I think these are not the times to refuse a conversation on our future relationship on foreign policy and security.
Bob, you're on the Foreign Affairs Committee.
Yeah, just on the final point, I mean, to be honest, I don't know if that's the case or not. I hear what you say. I will talk to the Foreign Affairs Committee chairman, who is half French anyway, Tom, and you raise a very good point, and I will say, I mean, maybe we can start having communication with the German. I know we had a German visit. The Foreign Affairs Committee was going to visit Germany last winter, and then we didn't because of our own elections and because of the dramas over Brexit. And clearly, I think flying is a bit difficult at the moment, but maybe we should be doing some meeting with the Foreign Affairs, with the German Foreign Affairs Committee or the European Union Foreign Affairs Committee, and start discussing this. And that's a very valid point. And the takeaway that I will follow that up next week when I talk to the chairman, when I see him. I mean, I wish we had moved on Huawei. We have not moved yet. The government is talking tough. But whether it delivers on that is another matter. Its problem is that clearly you've got the US pushing very hard on one side, and on the other side, you have Parliament, and the government are going to struggle to get the telecoms security bill through, which is the law that it needs to put in place to limit Huawei to 35% and do lots of actually very sensible things to our 5G market, to enable the 5G market. We are moving on China, and actually what's interesting is that parliamentarians in the UK, and I suspect in other parts of the world, are actually moving more quickly than their governments. And this is one, there's been a new Interparliamentary Union on China called IPAC, which was set up a couple of weeks ago. I know it has German representatives and it has European Union representatives, including from the Green Party. And I think it's a Green Party lady at the European Union level.
My colleague is a member of it. Reinhard Bütikofer.
Fantastic. That's good. That's great. I was very pleased that they managed to get her on board, which is excellent. So we are moving on this, but we are not there yet. And the government is making promises. What I don't know is whether the government is determined to push those through. We've just had a £400 million investment announced today by Huawei, and clearly, you know, that is not coming without a payback of some kind that China expects. And I think China could potentially have a nasty shock on 5G. I hope we're going to win that vote later this summer. It was meant to be this month. It may not be now until September, but we're going to have to get Labour on side. We're going to have to get all the other political parties on side, and then we're going to have at least 50, if not 60, Conservative members to ensure that we get Huawei out of 5G. One final point, 5G decisions are being made at national level in the European Union, is my understanding. So France has gone ahead with a Nokia and Ericsson system, Nokia providing some chunks and Ericsson providing other chunks of it. So what we need to do in both North America, elsewhere in the world, and in the European Union and the United Kingdom, is make sure that we have free markets that are not deliberately undercut as a matter of Chinese strategic policy. So not only do we keep not only do we keep Nokia and Ericsson as viable entities, as businesses, but 5G, as 5G becomes more software orientated, we need to make sure that we have national, we have some startups, whether they're in Berlin or whether they're in Old Street in London, it doesn't matter, as long as you've got viable players that are not being undercut and destroyed by China as an act of deliberate policy.
Can I make a very quick funny note? Because we have the software, by the way, the German software on 4G sits in Hamburg. And we have a great French one, we have Spanish one, really amazing. They're actually at the top on doing 5G and software 4G. And they all have offers now to be bought up by Chinese or American Microsoft. And it would be a shame if in this crisis we let them go down and don't make sure that they do survive. And by the way, one thing that I like in the UK about the 4G, 5G is that you have in your law that if a provider who has the license for the area is not delivering and doesn't deliver the service to the citizens in the region, they have to give up the license and free it. And now you have local communities in the UK who set up their own software for 4G, much smarter than the rest, actually paying less. And in Germany, the rural areas that don't have coverage, they can't even get out because the companies are not forced to free those licenses. And I'm always advocating for the British model of saying, okay, you buy the licenses, but if you don't deliver, then you have to free them. And then you get the much smarter, innovative software companies in there and do deliver to rural areas. So that's actually an example I do cite from the UK quite a bit. I know your country, you have great things there. That's why I'm so sad that you're leaving.
I'm just happy to take any compliment I can from you.
This has been an absolutely fantastic discussion. We're over time. I need to bring this to a close. Chris, do you have any final thought? It's an interesting turn that this discussion has taken towards the end.
It has, yes. Let me just say one thing. As somebody who studies international relations in the broad sense and teaches a lot of students, the world is a dangerous place. I'm agnostic about 5G and Huawei and all the rest of it, but there are 193 members of the United Nations. Quite a few of them take a very different view of China and even its internal affairs than we do. And I would simply say that looking back over the 50 years of the Cold War and all the rest of it, it's very easy to whip up a hysteria of enmity, creating an enemy. The Greek poet Kovid finally said in one of his poems, didn't it? They were useful after all, those barbarians, weren't they? We all need barbarians, and we should be very careful about treating other civilizations as enemies and barbarians.
Well, we could carry on this conversation, and thank you for opening up that strand too, Chris. But thank you to the panel and to everybody who's been listening for taking part in this terrific discussion. It's time we bring this to a close. My thanks to Dr. Franziska Brafner from the Green Party, Siemte Müller from SPD in Germany, and here in the UK, Bob Seeley MP and Professor Christopher Hill of the University of Cambridge. Apologies if you asked a question and I didn't get to it. And if you didn't catch all of the event, or if you'd like to hear any of it again, it's being recorded and it'll be up on the website of the Geopolitics Centre. And don't forget, there are many more webinars from the Geopolitics Centre. Just go to their website to have a look or get on their mailing list if you'd like to. But for now, my thanks to everybody. And that's it from us for the moment. Join us again soon.
Thank you, Bridget.